Very good at asking questions.
Hello, and welcome to Queer Coded Live. I'm Emily.
And I'm Eli. Usually on the podcast, we talk to a guest to get their views on the world of tech, but today, in celebration of Transgender Day of Visibility, we thought we'd help you get to know us a little better, so we're going to answer some of the questions we're usually asking, along with a couple more thrown in from viewers of the podcast. So, without further ado...
So our first question that we usually ask people, what were your early influences and awarenesses of tech as a child? Eli.
So I played a lot of very early kind of proto Mario type games on a BBC computer that my mum had. My mum used to teach IT when I was a kid, so I had like access to Encarta and the internet before a lot of people did, which I really didn't use well enough, but mainly just messing about with CSS on MySpace.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, MySpace was a big thing for me. It was, I don't know, like, when you're that age, it's like the only, I know it sounds like really angsty, but I feel like it's like, this is the only true expression I have of myself. Everyone needs to know, like, how much I love Breaking Benjamin. He cares so much. Tom from MySpace, he cares so much that I have this like cool like lava lamp background on my MySpace, right?
Yeah, and he obviously is still invested in whether he's in your top 8.
Yeah, right. He's not. I'm sorry. It's all Breaking Benjamin.
Fair. What about you? Any other influences as a child?
Yeah. God, I remember like so when I was like prop kid, like my like first like console was at N64, and I remember being like just glued to the TV playing Mario Kart 64. And not much else. And then it was just kind of a thing of like, like Nintendo to Nintendo to Nintendo, and just like continuing. And then it was like whenever there was like a new piece of tech in the house, it was like I was the first one to get it. Not in like a spoiled way, more just like I want to touch this. So very quickly became like the tech support of the house. I don't know. Did you ever get that?
A little bit, yeah. In fact, during lockdown, I was actually kind of the tech support for extended family. So I'm still the favourite person in the family of my wife's aunt, because I helped her get her yoga online via Zoom during lockdown. That's amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I remember like when I don't know if you ever did this in like lockdown, but do you know like the like Zoom pub quizzes with your families? Yeah, and just the amount of times you'd have someone on, and like just remember like early like Zoom days when every Zoom was just like, can you hear me? Can you hear me? And like you can just see like your nan or something like this close to the iPad, like trying to be like figure out where the sound's coming from. Like hold it like a phone.
No, it's just on like there's an iPad on the table and someone's just there going, what?
Yeah, definitely. It felt like very much kind of it was always there for me, not in like a weird therapy way. It was just always around. Yeah. Oh God, you were always there for me, Game Boy. And she was, but
Amazing.
Yeah. No, I never really got to do like much like coding or programming. Like it was MySpace. That was the pinnacle for me.
Same, definitely. I think when you love something as much as we both clearly love MySpace, the main thing you need to do is get right in under there and mess about with how it works.
Yeah, I honestly think like there is a severe lack of social media right now that doesn't have that option, and I think we should do that. Everyone who's watching, don't take that idea. That is ours. So if you want to help us with it, that's fine. Next question, James. James is our lovely, lovely person behind the computer. I'm not sure he has an official title. There's that was weird. In 10 years' time, someone's going to take that and take your fingerprints. The AI is going to get you.
Cool. So, Emily, what was your journey into the industry like?
So glad you asked. I came from not really a tech background. My first big job was in a retail store, which will remain unnamed as I don't want to give them free advertising. But from there, they had like an opticians as well, and I moved into the opticians to get away from the tills, and found out that I really, really quite liked it. And then, because they weren't paying me much, I was like, hey, I can use all these skills you've given me and go somewhere else. So I ended up in like private healthcare, doing like eye healthcare, and yeah, it's super interesting. Like I really, really enjoyed it. But the best part of it was getting to use like really specialized equipment. So like one machine that I really enjoyed using, it's called No CT scanner, and it literally takes a cross section of the back of your eye, so you can see all the different layers.
Oh wow!
Oh, it was so interesting. But yeah, I loved that part of the job, and like just working with like high tech stuff and like cutting edge, and like it was so interesting to see. And then, bad management happens. Sorry if you're watching. I just wanted to get out, and so I started looking at like coding kind of like courses, because if you're in a bad place, the first thing you do is go to the internet and say, what are good jobs, or what are jobs that make people happy, and like computer programmer was like pretty commonly at the top of those. So I started looking at like apps that would help me learn, and like looking into courses. And then the app I was using was like, hey, we do a course. It's not North Coders, don't worry. I'm getting there. And I was really considering doing it. And then my partner was like, why don't you look at other boot camps? Because I'm pretty sure there are other boot camps and you might find something that is better suited to you. And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. So I had a look around. I spoke to an old friend of mine, and they said, oh, I went to North Coders. They're really, really queer friendly, super nice, really great atmosphere, had a great time. And I was like, you know what, that's a good enough endorsement for me. Obviously, with the course being like 13 weeks, it's a big time sink. So you kind of like, how do I deal with that? Fortunately / unfortunately, I had to go off for major surgery for like 2.5 months. And so I went for surgery. I came back. I came out of hospital like a week later and immediately started the course. So I was doing like, the whole course from bed, just like recovering, just like, oh my God, I'm so tired. But it was just like worth it to kind of like get somewhere that I wanted to. And yeah, when it all finished, I applied and managed to get a job at this lovely, lovely place.
Amazing. And for context also, as someone who taught on Emily's cohort, you were one of the very best people on the cohort. So the fact that you did that from bed recovering is amazing.
I'm going to clip that and I'm going to play it to myself at night.
Please do.
Yeah. How about you? What's yours?
You can send me that tenor later. Much like many people during the omnipresent coronavirus pandemic, I was working in hospitality at the time. I was working as a bar manager, and realised quite early on that probably I didn't want to work in a public-facing role anymore during a pandemic. So I was on furlough I was very lucky to be on furlough for a lot of time. I know that a lot of people had to battle quite hard to get that. So I spent that very hot summer sitting on the balcony and learning to I basically did like Hello World sort of level stuff in loads of things. Did a bit of Code Academy, and then ended up going back to work. And then we went into another lockdown, and I was facing redundancy, and I was like, do you know what? Probably you actually need to commit to this at this point. Yeah. So I was like going to be on furlough for quite a long time, facing redundancy. So I signed up for the course, and then I think about 3 weeks into the course, I got asked to go back to my job, and I was like, no, thank you. I think I'm going to carry on with this now, but thank you for not making me redundant for that time.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair.
But yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar kind of feeling of like being in a public facing role, like, being in like healthcare. It was very, very scary because like you just kind of like this could happen at any point to me. But kind of like being in healthcare at the time in a private hospital was probably one of the better places because we could kind of be like, you're not coming in. Like we're a small place just dealing with like 60-plus-year-olds just who are having cataract issues. It's kind of like, very, very low risk. But I get it. Like you just kind of feel like there is a safer place I could be than this.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And also, that sounds like, well, I found something that was not doing this and that was it. But actually, like, once I started learning, I really enjoyed it. And I think kind of just the problem solving aspect of coding really appealed to me in a way that kind of it gets in your brain. And even when you're like, okay, I'm done with this, you're like, you end up going back an hour later and you're like, I will solve this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like I remember being like I said, I'm not lead on the course now. You say it to the students all the time, like, don't code this evening. Enjoy your weekend. And you're like, we both know that like we were on the course like 5 p.m. being like, yeah, I'm just gonna spend 3 more hours on this. No worries. And it's just like for loops, and I'm like, oh, I just bloody love for loops. Like, bro. Yeah, I totally get that.
Cool. So on that note, what kind of impact do you feel that being queer had on your career path?
I feel like this question, like to someone who isn't queer, might come as like a bit of like a forced question, but it kind of carries so much actually.
Yeah.
Like especially, no, I don't want to say especially because I don't want to say like other people have it worse, but like being trans, being like say if you're like gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, whatever, like all of these identities are not inherently visible. So a lot of the time you are kind of like invisible in that space. In regards to your identity, I'm not saying that like, like everyone knows what it means when you wear flannel, like, let's be real. But like being trans in like a public facing sector is so terrifying because you're right there in front of someone. Like I remember in when I was working retail, I used to work on customer service, like, at the tobacco counter. And when you're in that position, you kind of can't escape a customer because you're behind a desk and like they come up to you, they tell you what you want, and they walk away when they want to. So, I had this guy come in a couple of times and, it was just like forcing conversation. I was just smiling because, I am paid to do that. And then, one day he kind of like figured out that I was trans through a series of questions that weren't really related to that. But, I kind of had to say, like, we asked me like, oh, what school did you go to? And I said, oh, the local boys' school. And he was like, oh, so are you? And I was like, what? Like, what are you asking? And he was like, oh, have you had surgery? And I was like, that's weird. Don't ask me that. I'm at work. You're a customer. Like, this is not the boundary. And he just couldn't get into his head, like, how odd that was to ask someone in, like, a public, like, place. Yeah, so, like, one of the big things about going into tech for me was I can work from a computer. Like, I'm not judged on who I am, what I look like. I'm judged on the work that I do. Even working in, like, healthcare, I was kind of okay in healthcare because I was working with, like I said, 60-plus-year-olds who have cataract issues. They can't see my face. Like, it's quite common in that respect when they're kind of like, oh, you're so gorgeous. And I'm like, you can't see anything on that board. And I'm like, yes, I am. Thank you. But like, even in that position, you do kind of get a bit worried that, what if someone says something? Like, how am I supposed to react to that in a way that might not get me fired? So kind of like going into it, it was very much the big thing for me was, I could put a screen in front of myself. I could, work remotely in a lot of places. But yeah, mainly that idea of kind of like judged on the merits of the work that I do as opposed to who I am was a big thing for me. How about you?
Similar and not similar. I think, my career path has been very strangled in a way that I was a trans person who did a gender and sexuality masters without realising they were trans. So, that's it happens. But yeah, I've had quite a sort of weird path through life and careers. But yeah, I think when I started my transition, I actually was working as a manager in hospitality, went back to working as a bartender just because I think people don't really talk about the fact that when you transition, it takes up so much mental energy. And it's all you think about all the time, at least initially. And I just wanted to do something where I was like, okay, I don't really need to think about this. I'm good at bartending. I know what to do here, and I don't have to worry about anything else. But I think, like you say, when you're facing the public, people give you feedback without you asking for it and without realizing they're giving you feedback. So, I think like the sort of iron test for me was sort of men coming up to the bar going, all right, love, every day, which, it grated on me, but also it's kind of, it tells you how other people perceive you, and it's a lot of feedback, but you understand it. And then at the point where people were like, all right, mate, I was like, something here is going in the direction I wish it to.
And then you wear those clothes for 3 months.
Exactly.
Oh, these are man clothes.
Hello. So I think that was sort of definitely something where I don't know. I think I talk with a lot of my friends who are queer a lot about how as a queer person, you don't mature at the same rate as everyone else around you, and because you have to work out who you are, and that's not just apparent to you in the way that it is for a lot of people. So I think when you especially if you're a person who's gay or a person who is queer, and then you adjust to that identity, and then for me anyway, then you adjust to being a trans person. It's kind of like you're just constantly on a bit of a gap year where you're just deferring growing up again and again, because you have to work out who you are before you do that. So yeah, I think at that point probably I had outgrown working in hospitality. It was comfortable for me, but I needed something to kind of give me that nudge into doing something that was better for me. And exactly. And I think in a way the pandemic came at a really good time for me, where it was just like, actually maybe you need to reassess what you're doing and do something that is going to engage you a little bit more.
I know. I think one of the biggest things I think that people and scientists and historians will see from the pandemic is just that massive shift of people realized this doesn't make me happy. What does make me happy? And just going for that, because it's such a massive, I don't know, almost like a common enemy. It's kind of you're all just kind of trying to make everyone else's life better and your own at the same time. I think it's quite interesting. I do wonder if just how many people had kind of their realization and coming out from just something like that of I'm not happy, what can I do to make myself happy, and just going, this is it for me.
Definitely. I think also it's sort of with circling back to tech as well, I've seen a lot of things recently about people who the algorithm on their Instagram or whatever has kind of subtly told them that they might be queer, and then they've explored that more and been like, oh, actually this is who I am, which is kind of a kind of Ouroboros really. But I think that's also quite interesting, that the things that you are interested in, maybe you're not consciously aware of them, but the algorithms know you.
So there you go. So a point for AI.
Okay, that's 1-0.
We have our first audience question.
A question? Excellent.
She would like to know, where are your pins from, Emily?
My pins? I grew them myself. These lovely pins are from a good friend of mine in Liverpool, Sophie Green. Shout out Sophie Green. She is a trans artist who sells most of her merch at Mersey Maid in Liverpool, lovely little cafe. She is absolutely fantastic, does really, really lovely kind of scouse artwork. But she's just a fantastic person. I don't know if she's watching right now. I think she's in Thailand on a holiday, so have a great time, babe. But fully endorse these. Just pronoun pins, which are really good. And then just general cool ones. But amazing artist as well. If you're just looking for something to have around the house. Great. Cool. Any more? Are we moving on?
No more.
No more. Fabulous. Eli, how do you think workplace attitudes have changed towards queer people in the recent years?
I'm glad you asked. I think it seems a lot of the time we're really like cheerleading for North Coders, but it's all genuine. I think working where we do, we are very lucky that we are in a very kind of safe environment where we know it's inclusive, and also, positively students know that it's inclusive. And so I think probably my gauge on that is not as good as it was. And I think this kind of draws back to the previous question as well, which is that I've always tried to work in places where I know that it is inclusive before I start working there, because I want my life to be nice as well. So I think, it's really difficult to say. I think at the moment there is kind of a real media storm against trans people, particularly trans women. And probably that has made some things a lot worse for a lot of people. I personally haven't experienced that, but I can imagine that the media is not making anyone's life any easier at the moment in that respect.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like I've only really experienced like overt transphobia and kind of like homophobia really once in the workplace. When I first came out, when I was working in unnamed retail store, there was a woman there who was very adamant that I should not be allowed in like the changing rooms and the toilets, and she kind of like really had this like very vocal in front of like customers. Like, oh yeah, very vocal, like just kind of saying like, I don't think she should be in the change rooms. I don't think she should be allowed to use the toilets. I just don't see why she needs to be in there. And my manager just kind of went to her, you just used the word she 3 times. There's your answer. So it was a very odd scenario. She retired early 3 weeks later. Of her own volition, like she was not forced out. But yeah, I always think of her, which is honestly just one of the funniest things, that I just made someone rage quit their job by being happy. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Like when being in North Coders, like there is such a great atmosphere of kind of like inclusivity and just acceptance, and like I don't think I've ever really felt like targeted or looked down upon by honestly staff or students for being like openly queer, openly trans. And like that's quite a big thing. I think like just being like openly trans in a workplace is quite a big thing. Like I know like a lot of people like don't really have that privilege, but I think like in a lot of respects, just kind of like being able to talk about it and not feel, I don't know, like taboo or dirty by just talking about it is such a nice feeling that I've never really experienced in another place. And it's a bit gushy, but I really like working with like other trans people, because yeah, like it's great like being in a place that's accepting, but just being able to kind of like just work with another trans person, just kind of, if anything did happen, I know that like I've got someone who I can talk to and be like, what is your view on this? Like you have like a great view of this as well. Yeah, so we do live in like a little bit of a bubble here, but I think overall like things are going in a positive direction, because as well, like all of the new workforce these days are being like, the older workforce is leaving, the newer workforce is coming in, and like the newer younger generation is just so much more accepting and just so much more kind of like friendly, and just want to make people feel happy and just get on with the day. Like they're just really not that bothered. So it is just by virtue of that, I think, getting better.
Yeah, definitely. I think also sort of what you just said kind of makes me think of why again Transgender Day of Visibility is really important, because the whole thing of if you can't be it, you can't see it is really true. And I think that is we've got a really good example here at North Coders of that, because as tutors, we are open about being trans, and we have more and more students who are now coming to the course because they've heard the podcast, or they've seen, they've read the mission statement, they've seen things about the fact that North Korea is an accepting place and won't tolerate transphobia, racism, any kind of sort of hate from people that is unwarranted. So I think in a way, that visibility of us being open about that is also really good for more people coming through, and is reflected now in the North Coda's workforce, which kind of makes me think, well, if more companies start being a bit more accepting and more diverse, then they will also have a more diverse workforce, because people are drawn in by, knowing that they will be welcome somewhere and treated with respect.
I think we talked about something like that on a previous episode, where it's kind of like, if you're not willing to hire a more diverse workforce, you're not going to have a more diverse set of problem solvers. It's like you are actively hamstringing yourself by not doing that. So, as I saw a great video as well the other day, just kind of, like a lot of people saying that, there's so much like like queer representation in media, there's too much, and this guy was talking about like negative bias, and like humans are just biologically wired to like notice things that they perceive as bad more. So the solution is that don't be homophobic. You'll see it less. Hello.
Another online question.
A question.
Amy. I've only ever worked in tech, but do you think that tech is more or less inclusive than other industries?
Good question.
That's a great question. Can everyone hear that, by the way?
Hear me say it?
Yeah.
They can see it.
Oh, okay, that's good. We're answering Amy's question. I kind of think it is.
Yeah. I would say so.
Yeah, like a lot of tech companies as well. Like they're always trying to be like on like the cutting edge. They always want to like push forward, and that does kind of sound like, oh, big evil corporation. But like the people who work at this big evil corporation are people who also want to push like society forward and push like push acceptance. Like people working in like HR, or again, like I said, like the newer generation coming in, making people more accepting, making workplaces more accepting. Whereas a lot of other industries are kind of in stagnation for various reasons. But yeah, I think on the whole, I would say tech. How about you?
Yeah, I would say so. And again, coming back to what you said before about more diverse problem solvers, I think, generally the tech industry is probably more accepting of queer people, more accepting of people who are neurodivergent. I think there is, because of the kind of industry that it is, looking for different ways to do things, it kind of makes people go, oh, well, this person is really good at this. Let's, put them into this role, and not having that kind of prejudice in the same way that a lot of industries do.
Yeah, it's a very like, it sounds bad, but it's like it's results based in like a lot of tech industries, and that's all that matters. And like that's like I said, that's what drew me to it. And I imagine that's a lot of the reason for like a lot of queer people going into like these kind of roles. Like no one's looking at unnamed retail store going, oh, that's the place I'm gonna change my life. Yeah. Oh, this is an interesting question. How should you react when someone comes out to you?
I think for me, kind of, I would treat it in the same way that anyone telling me any information that was bringing me into their confidence was. So it's not, you don't have to have had people come out to you before to know how to handle that situation. I think kind of asking them questions about it, thanking them for trusting you with that information, and asking them if there is anything that you can do to help them. I think for me anyway, I think mainly in that situation, when you come out to people, you don't necessarily need anything from them apart from acceptance. And just, a lot of the time, just someone going, cool, okay. Like,
Yeah.
What? Like, tell me about it. What do you feel about this? I love you and respect you. Please continue. What about you?
Yeah, I want to say like, so something that I was kind of always I've always had in my mind is when something happens, like the first thought you have about it, that's how you're raised. The second thought is actually who you are. That knee-jerk reaction, that instant reaction, everyone's just going to feel that. Like, don't feel guilty that maybe you were like shocked or hurt or grieving in some way. Like, that's just how you feel. What matters is then, okay, how do you actually handle the situation? When I originally came out to my parents, like, oh my god, it was terrifying. I I don't know if they're watching, but I sent them a Facebook message. I actually said, "Oh, I'm just going to the park for a bike ride," and I stepped out the door, sent them a message, and I rode my bike as hard as I could. I was just like, "Let's see what happens. If it all goes well, I'll come back home. If not, well, I'm already out." Yeah, so I was quite terrified, to be honest. But that kind of like initial thing that happens, like that is just fine. Like if you, like I said, if you're grieving, if you're surprised, if you're shocked, if you're kind of like, if it hits you like a gut punch, that's still fine. But yeah, like I said, like the next step then is, okay, how do I make this person more comfortable? Like if you really care about that person, all you want is for them to be happy. And they've said to you, this is what's going to make me happy. So just kind of, support them in that. When you come out, I don't know how like you felt, but it is very, it's very destabilizing. Like you just feel like everything's up in the air and you just need something to ground you. So yeah, just like asking questions, just normalize it as quickly as possible. Just kind of be like, yeah, cool. Like I'm sorry you've had to hide this for so long. I'm sorry you've had to feel this way for so long. But like I'm glad that you feel comfortable now. Cool. Let's make it better.
I think another thing that I'd kind of forgotten, I come out all the time. Every 3 years I come out,
Yeah.
But also, we joke about that, but actually as a trans person, as a queer person, you come out every day, you come out all the time. And actually I was reading this as like the first time someone has ever come out, which it takes a lot of kind of guts to get to that point. But then also, it could just be a colleague who you see every day who's like, oh, actually, by the way, I'm a man who's married to a man. And you don't know that beforehand, for example. So I think, there is still, as much as you do come out to people, there is still that thing of like, oh God, is someone going to reject me?
Yeah.
And as time goes on, it gets easier and easier, but also still like have that kind of appreciation of the fact that someone is sharing something with you and it has taken something from them to have to do that.
Yeah.
Because no one has to come out if they are heterosexual. So yeah, I think just be kind of be aware of that and be as always be kind.
Yeah, I think that whole thing of like coming out every day is so understated, and I think like a lot of like straight cis people just don't get it. Like it's like coming out is like a big thing. Like I remember my dad saying like, oh, I don't see why people have to come out. Like it's a big thing. And I'm just like, just because that's like people just assume that people aren't queer. Like that, like not queer is like apparently the default in society. So it's like I have to like tell you, because otherwise you're just going to assume this about me, and I don't want that, because that has significant ramifications of how you treat me. Yeah, I think if someone comes out to you and you are genuinely like, go to therapy, like figure that out about yourself. Like why does that shock you so much? Like why does that I don't know, like hurt you so much? I don't know, but like what are those feelings to you? Why are you having those feelings? Like go to therapy. More people should go to therapy.
Yeah, definitely.
Next question.
I feel like we've touched on this a lot already, but do you feel that you're able to bring your whole self to work?
Yes. No, I don't. And that's not the fault of North Coders. Like I do want to say that for lawsuit reasons. But I feel like I'm able to like come out at work and talk about myself at work and talk to myself about the students and but even like talking to students is still a little bit terrifying sometimes. Because we do have like policies where we can we say like this is a place of acceptance, we will not tolerate intolerance. So like I know I have that protection, but it's still not a nice feeling. Like like someone says something to you, it does stick with you, and that's not just like being trans, that's just like anyone. Like someone makes fun of your trainers, like it ruins your day. Yeah, but like in any kind of workplace, I definitely feel like this is the most place I can bring myself, like my entire self. But again, I feel like it's just because I work with queer people, I work with trans people. I can kind of like make those jokes and talk to people, and I can, like make like little jokes that like only like queer people are really going to get on board with. Yeah, I remember like seeing something like I love being friends with straight people because I'm just making like entry level queer references and I'm the funniest person alive. But like I feel like those things that you can just kind of like have a conversation with someone. Like in my last workplace, I was the only queer person. It was a staff of maybe like 10, 12 people, and I could talk to them about that kind of stuff, but it was never kind of like open to talk about it. It was like I had to initiate it. And I know there's a whole thing of like, oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing, I might offend you, which is fair. But I mean, like, just don't be weird. I'm happy to talk about stuff. I'd rather educate people than just have them like guess things about me. Yeah. How about you?
Yes, I mean, I think like similar, and like absolutely, I would rather people ask things than guess, and everyone learns something. I do feel like I can pretty much bring my whole self to work. I mean, as someone who's got neck tattoos, I think you roll the dice with that. But yeah, I think for me, kind of because I don't know, I think kind of when I first started my transition, it was kind of telling people that I was trans because they perceive me as female. Now it's telling people that I'm trans because they perceive me as a cis male. So it's kind of, I think it's not difficult. It's an absolute privilege, but kind of more sort of making it clear to people that you are trans and being that visible person that other trans people, other non-binary people need to have around as that kind of reassurance that they will be safe in this space. Yeah. Without being like, hello, I'm your seminar lead and I'm transgender. Like, you're not going to do that.
Yeah, every session.
Yeah, exactly. Just a reminder, everyone. You were off sick last week, so I'm going to tell you. No. But yeah, so I think, it's one of those things that for me, it's really positive. I think the fact that we do the podcast, the fact that we get to talk about trans issues, LGBTQIA plus issues in the workplace, and we get paid to do that is a real privilege. And I think for me, definitely, it's the place I've most been able to do that. And I think actually for me, because you do feel worried about sharing certain things about yourself, but actually the more that I share things with students, actually the better my experience with students is, because they're like, oh, you're a human person. Yeah. Let's have a conversation. Yeah. And everyone just feels a bit more comfortable.
No, I totally get that. Yeah. I've never really realized it until you said it, but yeah, like it is a bit terrifying, like kind of talking to students about that kind of stuff, and you kind of like, you don't really want to shoehorn it into like, an SQL seminar. It's like, so we select here, by the way, just in case you didn't know. Yeah, but the idea of kind of like having, like someone there who just is, who is queer and is trans, and it just makes such a difference, because it just kind of says like to any student who might be having those feelings or might be questioning, it's fine, like you can still do this, you can still succeed in this space, specifically. I think that really really means a lot to a lot of people. Like I've had students come out to me on the cohort, and it is such a nice feeling to be like, I'm really happy that you felt comfortable telling me that. I've had like, ex-colleagues come out, because I came out in that workplace. Like, it was really, really lovely to see those people just kind of like feel comfortable enough with themselves to do that. Like when I came out, oh my gosh, like it was so before I came out, I looked very, very masculine, to the point of like having like a huge beard. And like going from like that to this, like such a stark difference, that's, yeah, people really didn't know how to like reconcile it. And I think kind of like coming out like that, and then those people who were having those questions, who were having those kind of like internal battles, saw that and were like, yeah, you can do it, I can do it. And it's just that one person, that's all you need. And it's really nice just to be able to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also sort of what you just said made me think about actually the fact that there is kind of this, there's this omnipresent concern about what was the gay agenda, which is now the trans agenda. And it's like, you want to turn all of our children transgender. And it's like, it's not though, is it? It's just people see someone who they identify with and they see that that person is happy and they go, oh, actually, I could be happy. I don't need to be scared.
Yeah.
And actually, that's the trans agenda.
Yeah. We don't want to make kids trans. We just want your trans kids to live. Like, that's all it is. Exactly. Like those kids, they're going to question. They're going to have those questions regardless if they see us or another person. Like, they're going to have those questions. And I definitely struggled with mine for so long, and it literally kind of took a very, very dark experience for me to even like make that choice to confront it, and I just don't want people to have to go through that again. Like, they should just kind of be able to be like, I just want to be happy. I don't want to have to get very, very dark places before I make that question. Yeah, so I think it is really important that, even though it might not be the easiest thing, that we do try and just kind of bring as much as we can. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Another online question.
Let's go.
From Nico Dillon.
Hi, Nico.
Hi, Nico.
You've mentioned the tech industry being slightly more inclusive of trans folk, and a want for more diverse hiring practices. Question incoming. Next comment. What would you like to see, brackets, from tech industry and beyond, that moves us above and beyond pronouns in email signatures? That's great, but there's more. Yeah,
this is an absolutely great question. And so a few months back, I did a panel with a couple of people from around like different parts of the industry. I'm sorry you weren't there. I have other friends. But we got to talk about stuff like this, like what are making like certain companies better for queer people. And like one of the big things, healthcare. Like, healthcare is such a massive thing. And as sad as it is for me to say, like, the NHS is not in a place where it can provide enough healthcare at the moment, not through any faults of its own. It's fine. It's just underfunded. Like, there's a lot of issues. I'm not going to go into it. I'm very passionate, but I'm not going to go into it. But like, healthcare is a huge issue for queer people at the moment. Like, it's really, really difficult to get. And so if I was able to go into a job and they were like, hey, look, we're going to help get you, your medication. If this is a thing that you want to look into, we can help you with medication. We can help you with getting towards surgery. We can help you get, like psychologists. We can help you get more comfortable. That's a huge thing, personally. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. I think like, I feel like as trans people, we take it for granted that we have this information, but for context, I started my transition 8 years ago. At that point, there was a 3-year waiting list for a gender clinic in Leeds. And so I pursued the private route because I didn't want to wait 3 years to do that. Fortunately for me, there was only a 3-month waiting list in Northampton. However, it meant that I had to travel somewhere to get treatment. So if you can travel somewhere to get treatment, that's great. But if you can't, you are stuck with that waiting list, which I'm sure has grown in size a lot since I was doing it 8 years ago. So it is a real issue for trans people. And if you don't have the money to fund that, you do have to be looking to GoFundMes and other sources of income like that. Or you have to be waiting for years before you can even get a consultation.
Our screen has gone off, by the way, James. The screen that has all of our questions. But that's fine. We can continue on this one for a bit. Yeah, I actually didn't know, but I also started my transition 8 years ago. So
Hey,
let's go.
go team.
Yeah, I was kind of stuck in a similar position. Like, it was, I think I originally applied for Sheffield, but again, it was like 3 to 4 years wait until I found that. Oh my God, where was it? It was somewhere really, really far down south, like Coventry, like ways. They had like, again, a 3-month wait. So I originally went to there, but oh my God, that's like a 5-6 hour drive. We had to do like a 2-day trip for an appointment that took 20 minutes, which is just ridiculous. That every time it was just this huge journey for the smallest appointment. Like, you know, I went there for a couple months, and then I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is 2-day, 3-day trip every time I need, just an appointment. So they moved us up to Sheffield, but I had to restart everything, which was just so annoying because I was like 3 or 4 appointments in already, and they were just like, "Yep, you got to start all over again." And I was like, "Okay, that's fine." But it kind of had to be, because it was, like that, or like 2-3 hours drive up to Sheffield, which was not better because we had to go through like Snake's Pass, which I don't know if you've ever done, but it's horrendous. I literally felt like, do you know those videos of like 18-wheeler trucks where they're driving around mountains and they're just like hanging off the side? I felt like that the entire time. It was horrible.
I quite enjoy it, like Colin McRae rally kind of
thing. Oh, see, I didn't enjoy it. One, because I wasn't driving. My mother was driving. God, love your mum. I was supposed to say God bless her, like she's not here. But yeah, God bless you. Like you took those roads like a champ. Yeah.
Actually, yeah. Shout out to my mum as well, who took me to all of my appointments in Northampton. Big up the mums.
Yeah, love you.
Not a question, but a comment from Amy.
A comment?
Depending on how you calculate it, the estimates for waiting lists are anywhere from 55 months to 37 years.
Yeah. I have heard those numbers also. Yeah, there was. I remember like when I came out, I think maybe like when I came out, it was around the time that the whole Caitlyn Jenner coming out was happening, and it was just such in the public dialogue that everyone was talking about it. And then, like I came out and I was like, yay, I just want to be me. And everyone was like, so how'd you feel about Caitlyn Jenner? And I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. But I remember like, 2-3 years afterwards, like I saw some statistics that was like the waiting list had grown by like 4,000%. Oh, it was horrific to see, because it breaks my heart seeing like people who are coming out now just kind of knowing what they are going to be waiting for.
Yeah. It's awful, and there's no kind of joined up system with that either. So like depending on which waiting list you're on, it could be that level of variation. Yeah, it is. So yes, coming back to Emily's previous point, healthcare provision that includes treatment for transgender people would be.
I think that's the biggest thing you could do to really like help a trans employee. If you're watching this and you are someone high up in a company and you have that kind of power, healthcare for queer employees in general are just going to be the biggest thing. It's so difficult to get, and not even just trans, like just queer healthcare in general is so difficult to even get, like, to talk to someone about. Like it's so difficult. There's just so much of the public that don't want to talk about anything of that way because it's not like straight. It's not cis. Like, on a lot of like websites, there'll be things like, like relationship advice and all that kind of stuff. And I've seen people like post on there who are in like queer relationships, and they get told that this isn't the place for them. They should go on like queer forums for it. Like, it's still a relationship, but they're just not willing to kind of like do it that way. Like, there is such kind of like a public backlash over just like queer people existing and having problems. Like,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Anyway, next question. Oh, it's an interesting question. What are some lesser known things about being trans that you think more people should know?
I genuinely can't think of anything off the top of my head now, which is awful.
Yeah. I don't know why I put this question
All right. What are some lesser known things about being trans that you think more people should know? Okay. I think sort of one thing that is a common assumption that people have is that you start a transition and then you take some hormones, you have some surgery, and then you're done.
Yeah, so true.
And that's it. And it's like, have you had the operation? And you're like, which of any of these numerous operations would you like to talk about, friendo? So, and also, I think the other thing there is kind of there is an assumption that all trans people want to get to our binary gender, which isn't the case for most people. So I think, that kind of assumption erases the experience of non-binary people. But also, all trans people are different. All people are different. All trans people are different. So, my journey as a trans man is going to be different to the next trans man, to the next trans man. Everyone wants to have a different thing because that is how they feel they are and how their body should be, how their life should be. So I think that is kind of probably one of the big misconceptions is like you do a thing and then you're done. And actually done is like, it's a sliding scale.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Just going through it all, like there are so many like kind of preconceptions that it's like someone else knows what your goal is, and it's like I don't even know what my goal is. Like it changes. Like I just want to be happy, and I might find one week that like dressing a certain way makes me happy, looking a certain way makes me happy. Like when I first came out, I really wrestled with the idea of like just keeping the beard and like dyeing it like cool colors, but I just know at that time that there was such a backlash against non-binary trans people, not in the way of like non-binary people, but like trans people who didn't fit like the binary of like this. No, you know what? I said that, but that's exactly what I meant. Like people who don't fit into a singular like male or female, and to the most overt excessive level. And I just knew that I was never going to be accepted in that time, doing like even having that question. So it just kind of had to come off. And I do prefer myself like this, but I feel like that choice was taken from me in a lot of ways. And I feel like now there is a lot of like resentment of kind of like anything masculine about myself because I was so forced to kind of like push that away from me.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Actually, that kind of repudiation of a gender is kind of like actually now I'm like I see like guys wearing nail polish and I'm like, oh, that looks cool. Actually, maybe I should do that. And I think I've spent so long kind of pushing back against anything feminine that I'm like, oh, actually, this is something that is open to you as someone who appreciates that. Harry Styles wears skirts sometimes. Probably you should be the person who is doing that for other people. But yeah, I think I for me again, like I think at the time that we were both coming out as being trans people, it was a lot less familiar to people that there was a non-binary gender option or numerous non-binary gender options, and I think that was I don't know, for me I found passing through that point of being non-binary very, very challenging, and having to tell people who you are every day very challenging. So I think the main thing that I've learned from that is just a huge respect for non-binary people, having to tell people who they are every day.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember like coming out, and one of like the main things that I wanted was just honestly just what everyone else wants, an easy life. But I felt like this was the way for me to have an easy life. Like it was just I just wanted to be comfortable. I just wanted to like how I looked, I like how I feel, like how I spoke, and it was as well. It was the safest option, not in a way of like, oh, I don't want to take risk. It was like this is the version of me that is least likely to get my head kicked in on the street.
Yeah,
and it's that's a huge thing. I think
that's a much bigger risk for trans women as well than trans men. So I think that's like absolutely fair that's a consideration.
And like there's a lot of argument against like the idea like from some people who are like trans women are just kind of making a bit of like a mockery of femininity and like hamming it up. And it's like, for a lot of trans women, that is the only way that you will accept them. You know, if they did like come out in slightly more masculine, you would be like, oh well, that's not a trans woman, you know, that's not a woman. You kind of really can't win either way. So I think after a while you just kind of have to do whatever makes you happiest.
Yeah, great point. Really great point.
Next question, James.
Oh, tough one.
Ooh.
How do you feel about current trans representation in media?
It's a bit difficult for me to answer this because I don't really partake in a lot of media. You know, like the biggest media I enjoy at the moment is just music. But I know like there's stuff with like Euphoria when that came out. There was a trans woman in that. Was it Hunter Schafer?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And like that was really. I haven't watched it, but like just knowing that was there and people loved this show and they were so excited about it and like, oh, she did amazing. That was so kind of like warming to me. It's just like, oh yeah, like, trans people can just be people. Yeah.
Yeah.
As well, like there's always like the idea of representation of like casting trans actors to play trans people. You know, in the past there's been like loads and loads and loads of movies where the role is for a trans person, but the actor is not trans. Like, you know, was it the Dutch girl with
Eddie Redmayne?
Yeah, you know, very very controversial. But I think honestly one of like the most interesting kind of like looks at it was Orange Is the New Black with Laverne Cox, and you know, there's a part where, you know, for the most of it, like she's playing a trans woman in a jail, but there is a section where it goes back in history and it's like pre-transition. She's lucky enough to have a brother who kind of like stepped in for that role, and it's like, okay, how do you handle those things? So it's a bit rough at the moment, and I know that some people will be like, oh, there's too much trans representation. I'm like, give me a list.
Well,
yeah,
I think it comes back to sort of what's positive representation and what's negative representation. I think I was reading an article earlier today about how there was something like 7,000 media representations of trans people in the last year, but actually most of those were negative. So it's like, you know, it's not visibility in the way that it's like people are visible. It's visibility in the way that like people are normal human people going about their day, doing things, and not, you know, this person went into a bathroom to go to the toilet. What awful crimes have been committed?
Yeah. If anyone's looking for like a much better answer than this than we could give, the documentary Disclosure on Netflix is honestly one of my favorite pieces of media in recent history. It just goes, I think, from like 1900 all the way up to like now, of just like the oldest representations. I think about 1920 or something, back when there was like really the earliest pieces of film. And trans people have been in film for pretty much as long as there has been film. But that whole thing is just like it. I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit heavy at times because the subject is heavy. But like that is a great piece of media that talks about representation over the years and how it's affected people and their mindsets and their opinions towards it. Like it's really really great. Yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
So I think is that all we've got time for?
Yeah. So I think that's about all we've got time for then. Yeah, it's been really lovely to talk to you all.
Absolutely.
Whichever camera you are currently viewing this on. This one.
Thank you for all your questions. There's been some really, really good questions, and really nice for us to have a conversation with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to each other. It's been really lovely to do this for anyone who's watching. If anyone does have any like questions about like, you know, being queer in tech, being trans in tech, queer in general, if anyone wants to talk about anything, I'm on LinkedIn at the Emily Bennett because I thought it sounded cool. But yeah, feel free to give us like an email. I'm sure there will be different pieces of contact posted elsewhere.
Yeah, same for me. Yeah, please at me. I think it's Elijah Wiggins formal on LinkedIn. But yeah, if you are a North Carolina student, also feel free to message us on Slack and we'll be sure to get back to you.
Yeah, right. Have a great night, everyone. It's been nice to talk to you. I'll see you later.
Bye.